Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to It's Rainmaking Time. This is Kim Greenhouse. Our guest today is Dr. Richard Sauder. He is the author of 5 books and major reports. Today, we are going to be talking to him about his book, The Richard Sauder Briefing, that has just come out. He's also the author of Underwater and Underground Bases, Kundalini Tales, Underground Bases and Tunnels, What is the Government Trying to Hide? And Hidden in Plain Sight, Beyond the X-Files. He is a researcher. He has several degrees. He's traveled all over the world and spent the last 30 years researching what is happening to humanity and this planet. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to talk about some very complex and often difficult things today on this show. Stand by and welcome Richard Sauder to It's Rainmaking Time. Good morning.
Good morning, Kim.
Thanks for being here.
My pleasure.
After reading the Richard Sauder Briefing, I have to tell you, I didn't want to cover this subject. I didn't want to cover the book, not because it wasn't a worthy book or a valuable book, but because there's so much difficult material in it. But I feel called to cover it anyway because a lot of what's in there people may or may not know. And I think that the responsible thing to do on my end is to work with you on this show to cover this and to lay things out in such a way where, A, people still want to pick up the book and read it, but to cover the essences of it in such a way that they get how jam-packed it is with important information for them. What led you to write the Richard Sauder Briefing in 2010?
Well, it wasn't my idea, is the short answer. A German publisher, Roman Schmidt Verlag, pitched the idea to me out of the blue. I did not know Roman Schmidt before he contacted me with an outline of a book that he thought I might be uniquely suited to write. He was familiar with my work. I was not familiar with his publishing house, but he said he thought I was the man to do the book, and so I thought about it for a day or two, and then I said, okay, I'll do it.
I found that the other book that we just did a piece on, Hidden in Plain Sight, Beyond the X-Files, was somehow digestible simply because you cited the technology, you cited the patents. The obvious conclusion is that we have underground tunnels and cities and totally different types of transportation, and under the seabed, the same. But something about the Richard Sauder Briefing, when you put it all together, I want to just lean back and say, what are we to do? But first, let's talk about what is this briefing?
Well, the essence of the briefing is to tell people we have been massively lied to. The reality that we're living in is actually a surreal, massive, thousands of years long lie, a veil of unknowing, not knowing disinformation, misinformation, and lies has been pulled over the earth like a dark curtain, and the majority of humanity are under its thrall.
In the book, you talked about so many difficult subjects like the scientific side of mind control, the political side of mind control. When it comes to the technology that's developed, of course, I interviewed Nick Begich many, many months ago. But the level of which you speak of and cite the shadow government and the enslavement of humanity, false flag attacks, secret and underground and underwater bases, the secret space program, Earth's insidiously hidden history, and the coming Earth changes are really, even though it's a small book of about, less than 100 pages, the pieces in it are so heavy that literally it could be a 500-page book.
Yes. In fact, each chapter in this book could feasibly be expanded into a book of 200, 300, 400 pages easily. In fact, my German publisher would like for me to do that. He'd like for me to expand each chapter into a series of books, each chapter being a book in its own right. And we may do that. That's on the back burner. But this is, in a sense, like a French pastry, where you don't wolf the whole thing down in 10 bites, but you take one bite, you sit back, and you let it digest a little bit. It's very rich in that sense. It really is.
You quote Professor Frank Drake, which I thought was very interesting in Chapter 7. Not that I want to speed into Chapter 7. And you talk about the Drake equation. Can you talk about that for a moment?
Sure. There was a famous, now famous, conference or meeting of cutting-edge astronomers and space scientists back in the 1960s at the Green Bank Observatory in West Virginia. And the topic of the conference was to talk about, extrasolar solar system planets and the possibility of extraterrestrial life. And Frank Drake, who was and still is a very well-known professor and figure in astronomy, came up with the Drake equation, which was used to estimate the number of planets potentially in the galaxy that could have a technologically advanced civilization on them. And I cite the equation in that chapter and discuss it, explain the terms in the equation a little bit, and then cite other evidence to show that indeed it is highly likely that in this galaxy, which has something like 400 billion solar systems, 400 billion stars, as we're finding out, many stars have planets around them and solar systems around them. So it's conservatively there are probably trillions of planets in this one galaxy alone. And from the standpoint of simple statistics on a stochastic basis alone, it is highly probable that there are many planets in this galaxy with life on them, and indeed it's highly probable that there are other planets with intelligent species of life on them. In other words, we are not alone.
I wonder why we never heard of the Drake equation. That's very interesting.
Yes, well, I heard about it when I went away to college. The equation appeared in a book written by Carl Sagan and a Russian astronomer named Shklovsky, and they co-authored a book together discussing the feasibility of life in the cosmos and intelligent life in the cosmos, and they cited his equation in their book, and it's really well known, I think, in the astronomy community and in the space science community. Part of the reason why it's not widely discussed in our culture is because our culture has been dumbed down. We have been propagandized not to know a lot of things and to be misinformed and disinformed about still other things, so that in general we live in a culture that doesn't know much about much of anything. And one of those things would be the Drake equation, because if you knew the Drake equation and you thought about it, you would come to the conclusion that, hey, the great likelihood is that we are not alone. The great likelihood is that the galaxy has many other planets on it that are life-bearing, and in all likelihood there are other intelligent species of life in this galaxy and in the many other galaxies throughout the universe. And that's a very cosmic kind of thought, which the powers that be that rule this planet would prefer that people not think. But the reality is that the galaxy is teeming with life. That's the logical conclusion.
You know what I heard, Richard? That there are universes. When we think of the universe, we think of the universe as a single verse, but it's really a multiverse, and there are other universes happening at the same time we are, and I just find that so fascinating.
Well, if you look at Vedic cosmology, and you look at Vedic iconographic art, there's one beautiful painting I saw by a Hindu painter in a wonderful collection of Vedic art issued by ISKCON, International Society of Krishna Consciousness. And in that picture, Krishna is leaning back in his four-armed cosmic form and breathing the universes in and out. In the Vedic conception, Krishna breathes out the universes, and they come out of his mouth or out of his nose like little bubbles, like the soap bubbles that children blow on a breezy spring day. And literally an infinity of universes come out of his lungs when he breathes out. And then when he inhales, that's on the exhalation. On the inhalation, he breathes them, sucks them all back in again.